Retired teachers of Reddit. Who is the student that you will never forget and why? Not a memorable student, but a hilarious janitor. I was a sub at an elementary school one year. There had been an incident next door where a kid picked his nose until it bled. And did it ever bleed? The teacher sent the boy to the nurse, which was at the other end of the school. I walked out of the classroom during my break period to see the bright red splotches of blood going all the way to the end of a long hallway and around the corner. As I rounded the corner, the janitor was at the other end of that next long hallway with a mop. He looked up at me and made a shush signal. Then loudly whispered, "I'm tracking deer." I was a new teacher. A student went out to the washroom, came back shaking and crying. Took her out into the hall with the door open as per policy. Through the sobs she tells me that her best friend from a neighboring city had died. All I wanted to do was hug her and tell her she'll be okay. I didn't. I followed the no-touch policies and sent her to the counselor. To this day I still regret not hugging her like I would any other person in this situation. My humanity had been taken away by my gutless rule following and fear of losing a job. Edit, info, male teacher. High school. As per why no touch was in place. We had a few high profile issues such as this going on. Didn't retire. Just quit. I was just a student teacher at the time, but there was this kid who was left back so much he was like 18 and was still in freshman social studies. He didn't give no ducks and the younger kids took cues from him because he was so much older, so it kind of threw the class off. A few years later his picture was in the paper for killing someone with a hammer during a home invasion. Won't forget him. Edit, sorry it's cues not cues. I have not set foot in a classroom in over a decade, so I have had time for my brain to go soft. One of my old music teachers told us about how he taught one of the biggest DJs in the world right now. And how he'll never forget him. Not because he was anything special, but because he was completely normal for a kid that age. He just worked unbelievably hard for his goals. And when he first got signed to the record label he is with now, he came around and thanked all the teachers for their patience with him. He signed to the label when he was 20, I think. He said it was nice to be appreciated. And just to use as an example that hard work can get you a lot further than talent. Especially in an industry like music. Edit, it's flume. I'm not a teacher, but my mom used to teach 2nd grade at a low-income school. She had this one Haitian student whom she will never forget. This little girl used to always get up to grab a tissue and mess around with it in her desk. One day my mom decided to investigate. She asked what she was doing with the tissues and this girl showed her. She had this little paper doll that she had cut out of notebook paper. The tissues were her baby's blanket. After this the girl would take out her bebedel, that's how she pronounced it, and just cared for it like a good mother. My mom was determined to get her a real baby doll from the school toy drive. So right before Christmas break it was time for the students to open their presents. The little girl opens hers to find a real baby doll with a bottle and all the essentials. The girl starts crying saying my bebedel. My bebedel. Over and over, just so happy. After Christmas break my mom was excited to see the little girl with her new baby doll return. But she wasn't there. My mom asked around. And apparently over the break this girl had been playing around a pond with some other kids. Fallen in. And couldn't swim. She drowned. It hit my mom pretty hard. Honestly. But I always just try to get her to remember how happy the girl was when she received her bebedel. It's sort of one of those be grateful for what you have stories that comes up in my family from time to time. I work primarily with retired teachers and I have heard some horror stories. A 6th grader stabbed one of my clients. I taught a male grade 10 student who was quite small for his size. When he was in grade 9, he volunteered to play an elf in a school Christmas skit. When he was in my grade 10 English class, a police officer showed up to my class and arrested him. Handcuffs and all. Turns out that for the year since he played an elf on stage, some mouth breather sack of shit had been following him around calling him Elf all the time. Hey elf. How ya doing elf? Shit like that. Finally, after a year of this abuse, this kid told his bully never to call him Elf again or he would be sorry. This was in math class, the class before mine, where the bully sat in front of this kid. The bully apparently smirked and said, "Whatever, Elf," and turned around. The kid then took out his compass and stabbed the bully in the back pretty deep. Then the bell rang and he came to my class. This was during a shitty zero tolerance policy era and the little kid was expelled because he committed the violent act. Nothing happened to the bully. I will always remember that kid. Feel sorry for him. But he got the job done. In 6th grade I hid under my teacher's desk on April Fools. 10 minutes into class I reached out at her. She screamed and fell out of her chair. Better not forget me. I'm a substitute and a teacher was out for the rest of the year after a hiking accident. He was okay next year. It was senior level course and it was an annoying class to teach. Guys would hit on me and no one gave a shit. There was this girl who was beautiful. Blonde hair. White skin. Perfect body. Looked like an angel. She was sweet. Talkative. Smart. Everyone loved her. A week into Christmas break, I get an email from my school that went to all of her teachers saying that her father was arrested for child sex abuse. Her name didn't go public, but all the students knew regardless. We were going to have a meeting from her counselor on how to treat her during class and make sure to be careful. I couldn't stop thinking about how horrible that was during my break and even cried a lot thinking about it. She never returned to school and it was later found out that she went to California to work for a modeling agency. I've googled her name before and the only result is a pray for her name Facebook page. She probably changed her name if she's smart. I always hope I see her one day on a poster or commercial or something. Just to know she's alright. Not retired yet but had a 5th grade student who couldn't grasp fractions. What number is that? UMM. 4-1 and 2. 4 and 1/2. He also frequently confused apostrophes with eighth notes. He's probs a musical genius. No big deal. This lovely kid I taught for 4 years. He showed up at my house one night with no shoes on and nowhere to go. So, I adopted him. Can't forget him because he's coming home for Christmas tomorrow. I'm not a teacher, but y'all Methodikas need some cheering up. And yesterday I did something that my teacher said she would never forget. My teacher, Liz, is super awesome all the time. She's patient, polite, competent, and she always has tea and snacks in her office. You know those teachers who give 110%? Well, they give about 40, maybe 45% of what Liz gives. Liz teaches Latin and Greek. So I got all my Latin classmates and some of her Greek students together to chip in for a Christmas gift. I bought her a copy of the Septuagint, the original Greek Bible. Because some months earlier she mentioned in passing that she did not have one. And was considering asking her mother for it for Christmas. Well, her mother went on Social Security earlier this year. Liz did not ask. But I wasn't about to let that keep her from getting it. So, I bought it. And because so many people chipped in, I also bought her a copy of the Vulgate. And a water filter. She has one in her office that she uses for tea. But it's old. She literally started crying when I presented them to her. I have done a lot of good and impressive things. But I tell you I have never been as proud of myself as I was yesterday. I once had a kid that stood on a desk and announced to the entire class that he was going to pee out of the window. He pulled down his pants and let the floodgates open. It almost worked. But the stream didn't end up making it to the window, so the girl next to him got soaked. She didn't come back to school for another week and I later found out that she needed therapy. He was in 11th grade. I used to volunteer to teach this after-school program for kindergarten and preschool kids in Singapore. There's this one German kid I'll never forget. I think he was about 3 or 4. And his parents were expats who just moved to the country. His mom dropped him with me and I took him to the room where everyone plays before classes start. He entered the room. Immediately froze. and had this petrified look on his face. I think it's the first time he saw a sea of Asian kids, and they were all staring at him because he's way bigger than all of them. They were scared of him and he was scared of them too. He finally unfroze, turned and ran out straight away. The poor kid stuffed himself inside a locker and refused to go out. He was previously speaking to me in English, but he lapsed back to German and kept babbling to me in German while holding my hand. I have no idea what he said, but I stayed with him until his mom picked me up, and he seemed happy to have me around. I'm Asian, so I guess he's okay with Asian adults. He never showed up again, but I still crack up when I remembered the petrified look on all the kids' faces. My mom has been a teacher on and off for about 20 years. And she had this one kid who never showered once while she had him. Other than that, he was a nice kid. But he smelled so bad that he didn't have any friends really. There is always that smelly kid. I always felt bad for them. I taught high school science for a few years, and had many of the best and brightest in the school in my advanced classes. And they were fantastic. I also had a few classes of students who were, shall we say, not so academically gifted. And although initially they were really frustrating, it was because I didn't know how to handle them. Once I yawned, those students became far more rewarding to work with than any in my advanced classes. I made it a point to connect with them as human beings, rather than to try to force them to do things, and to show them that science doesn't have to suck. They really appreciated that, and I like to think I may have made a difference. One student in particular was Joe. I had Joe in a 10th grade chemistry class from hell my first year of teaching. And other teachers had warned me about him, along with 90% of the other students in that class. To be fair, something happened about a month into the class and Joe decided that he liked me. He listened and paid attention in class, which I heard later he didn't do in many of his other classes. Would laugh at my jokes, no small feat. Mind you, my jokes are notoriously awful, and would respond with jokes of his own. I don't have any specific stories of Joe, but he was that kid who made me smile every time I thought about him. His academic career after he left my class was undignified, but he graduated. When he did, he sent me a really nice card to say thanks, and that meant more to me than any gift or card I got from my students who went on to do very well at very prestigious colleges. TLDR, students don't have to be good at school to leave teachers with good memories. So in high school, for struggling and troubled youth, we had this one teacher, still there teaching chemistry and biology, that is a massive germaphobe. He wears a lab coat and medical gloves all the time, and when he doesn't, he's washing his hands or sanitizing everything. We'd always ask him to tell the newer students the story of why he wears his gloves. So he tells us that before the school changed and they were still in portables, and there was one student who spent all of class with his hands down his pants. Curious and disgusted, he asked as the class was leaving if he was alright. The kid said, "I think I've got like an STD or something. But I've got these pimples on my crotch and whenever I pop them, it feels better." So he proceeds to pull his hands from his pants, fingers covered in pus and blood. To say the very least, he had the entirety of the class that stayed after to help him sanitize the entire school. Never stopped with the whole thing ever since. This is very anticlimactic, but while teaching my grade 6 class, this one kid had allergies. He sneezed into a tissue, which had reflected all the snot onto his glasses, hair, and face. I could tell he was clearly embarrassed. And to add to that, the whole class was staring him down. I quickly had to defuse the situation, and handed him tissues. Kindergarten. Story time. Sitting still. Kid stands up, runs around. Intern tries to calm him down. Teacher keeps reading, like 80 years old. Bless her. But she has to stop. Intern calls the office. Kid is crying and running around. He gets to the classroom door, throws it open and runs out. Intern is like, "Oh shit," and runs out. We continue story time, and the door is still open. See kid run by the other direction, followed shortly by intern and principal. plus janitor. Kid runs by again. This time only followed by janitor. Intern comes back to class. Disheveled and says I'm too old for this job. Intern quit after that day. Goddamnit Hunter. I have a number of students I still remember fondly, with whom I'm still in contact years later. At least peripherally. I have one student I feel I may have failed to help. He was a freshman punkus kid who was always acting out in minor ways in class, making jokes about me he thought I didn't get. Roughhousing with friends. etc. Pubescent attention getting stuff. But I saw something the front was hiding, and tried to draw it out. Gut feel was that it was rough family life. It was an acting class. And he actually had some real talent when he paid attention. I drafted a letter to send to his parents about how talented he was and how good the work he was doing was, but was in the middle of an awful battle with the school administration and a colleague who was threatening me. And I never sent it. I think I still have the draft saved. 20 years later. I still wonder what difference I could have made in his life if I'd encouraged him with that letter. And yes, I love teaching and my students were amazing. But I left because of the administration and politics. The US education system is ducked. My grandmother taught Magic Johnson when he was in 4th grade. The story goes that he refused to learn to read because he didn't see the point in putting in the effort. He knew he was going to be famous. My grandmother asked him what he would do if he couldn't play basketball. Wouldn't he need to be able to read then? No. Nothing's gonna happen to me. Candice was a beautiful 4th grade girl in my classroom. Unfortunately she only spoke in public once that year to recite a poem. During that time my normally chatty class went dead silent, then gave her an ovation. The rest of the time she sat huddled in the corner hoping I wouldn't ask her a question. At recess she'd huddle under a deck stairway until I coaxed her out. When she laughed at one of my dad jokes, "What does a buck-toothed cow say?" "Moof," she'd hide her mouth with her hands. I paid her 0.25 cents every time she did not do that and finally bought her a pizza. 8 years later she returned to the classroom inviting me to her graduation. During that ceremony she spoke to the crowd of losing her mother to hepatitis, her father to drug us and being shuffled from one relative to another and finally to foster homes. The year I had her she went silent, blaming herself for her troubles. She graduated high in her class and is planning on social work as her future. Although why an accounting job in the middle of a forest of cubicles wouldn't be more appealing is beyond me. Her life is already been way too exciting. My mother works with the trouble students. Flight risks and violent ones and such. The one that she remembers to this day was early in her career. Flipped a desk over and started screaming at her. Classroom had to be cleared as he grabbed a pair of scissors from another student and was waving them around. So my mom grabbed him while the teacher of the class called for help from the office. In the time between grabbing him and other teachers arriving, he bit her and she needed stitches. Back to work the next day. Kid was gone. So much respect for some of the crap she puts up with. He was a sophomore in high school. His family seemed a bit rough, poor. More interested in marijuana than education. I was a substitute teacher so I only saw him occasionally. But I liked him a lot. We were talking one day. I think he was doing poorly in one of the advanced classes he was in and thinking of dropping it for a regular level class. And I said to him, "Would you rather be the best of the worst? Or the worst of the best?" I forgot about it. But a year or two later he was about to graduate and I saw him again and he reminded me that I said that to him. And how much it had stuck with him and helped him get through the tough classes. He said he was going into the military after graduation because they'd give him a full ride to college later and he'd be the first in his family to get a college degree. That was years ago. I think about him sometimes. Hope you're doing well. Randy.